Hello, welcome to another live Google Hangout on the Living Income Guaranteed. And today we will be discussing bold ideas for humanity, money-free party, and what would you say would happen if our society could work without money? How would we organize ourselves? How would we value things? And I know that this idea might seem outrageous or far-fetched for many. However, our guest today has made it his life purpose to actually promote a resource-based, money-free society and taking it to the streets in a very literal manner in Nelson, New Zealand. So our guest today is Richard Osmaston, co-founder of the Money Free Party in New Zealand. So hello, Richard. Welcome and glad to have you here.
Hello, Marlon. Good morning. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Yeah, it's really great to be here in the morning here in New Zealand. So,
exactly. It's Monday there, so that's a quick fact for everyone that is watching mostly on Sundays. And hi to everyone watching on New Zealand, of course. To our viewers, as you know, there's going to be questions, comments open. If you are on the Google Plus event, make sure that you place them throughout the 40 minutes approximately that we will be discussing with Richard. And we will be focusing more on his own work and the groundwork that he does in his city, as well as the principles that he applies, that he lives. And we won't go as much into detail about the reasons why he's doing this, because by now we are all mostly just thirsty to get to know more about solutions, proposals, plans, and he's got quite a refreshing plan to make his community work without money. So let's get on to our discussion. So first of all, Richard, I'd like you to share with us a very brief manner of explaining what is the main tenet of the Money Free Party and how can you describe its main purpose?
Sure. Okay, good. That's a good start. Excuse me, Marlon. Just to get right in at the beginning, in a money-free society, we neither have trade nor barter nor alternative currencies, and that's extremely important. This won't work in a piecemeal fashion. We have to do it all in one go, and we won't be having green dollars or time banking or a barter economy. This is not going backwards. I'd like to get spend a long time during these discussions thinking that we're going to be trading and bartering like we were in the old days. And of course, it's not the old days, it's the 21st century. Things are very different now. We realized that right from the start. To help with the background, I dare say a lot of your listeners will be familiar with the Venus Project in the United States and the Zeitgeist movement. And to sort of shore us up, since we've been promoting a money-free society, which is about 5 years full-time now, a lot of other organizations have come to the fore as well around the world, and there's now your own organization. There's the New Earth Nation, the Free World Charter, and of course the Zeitgeist Movement and the Venus Project. Ubuntu in South Africa, which is springing up all over the world now. And I think it's quite important that we don't get too bogged down with the specific tenets of each individual organization. They're all very different, but they all have the same basic goal. And I think this is very different from previous sort of freedom, people's rights, labor movements, union movements of the past, because we're talking a whole societal shift now. It's not just a bit more for them and a bit less for them, which I think traditionally has rather founded major social change in the past. This is win-win now, and that's one of the wonderful things I'm able to say with utter sincerity to people in public. With this societal shift, there are no losers. Everybody wins. Absolutely everybody, and that's totally unprecedented in human history. You know, it's always been more for me and less for you. Different now, really, because of technology. Anyway, that's what's made it possible. It hasn't answered your question at all, has it?
Well, we're going to get into details about also the hierarchical structure and how it will be essentially debunked with what you propose. But let's go bit by bit here. So I'd like to say that I personally like the fact that resource-based economy is placed in the political arena to make it a more legitimate and actually democratic proposal, which wasn't part of the initial group that promotes a resource-based economy. I like the fact that people can get informed, get involved directly through the democratic means, which is like the traditional way to make yourself part of a new movement. So why did you decide then to make your plan with also with Nick Tapping, as I was getting to know of, to make of the money-free and resource-based economy project a political party?
Well, it's funny you even use the word plan, because, I mean, we're breaking such new ground with this movement that to have a plan, and I think in many ways the same applies to anything in the 21st century, to have a plan, it's all right to have sort of guidelines, but things are changing so fast today. I don't know if you've seen the movie Will Work for Free, but that's an amazing insight into technology is advancing with an exponential acceleration. And really, to have a long-term plan is quite frankly farcical today, because we don't even know what's going to happen next week, let alone in the any sort of distant future. So there was never a plan to have a political party. It just sort of came along organically. And for me, I found myself, I'd always done a lot of presentations to schools, to sort of hippie groups, festivals, exhibitions, that kind of thing, but I could feel myself being not exactly relegated, but there was sort of a glass ceiling, and those sort of groups are sort of given a pat on the head, and oh, that's interesting, yeah, I'll take a leaflet, thank you, goodbye, now let's get back to, and there was a sort of a distinction between protest and activism and actual real politics where the real decisions get made. And it was about 18 months ago when the local elections took place in Nelson, and in fact all over New Zealand. They're all at the same time in this country. And it occurred to me then that I could run for the mayor of Nelson, to be mayor of the city. And I mean, I knew it was a bit of a long shot, and I didn't really expect to win, but I'd got sufficient confidence in the material, in the money-free material and the concept of a resource-based society, that I felt confident to present it on stage, literally alongside other politicians who who know how to run a country, proper serious people who wear ties and suits and talk the real language of grown-ups, because they know how to run a society and they're doing such a great job of it. And the more I thought about it and the more I talked to people about it, they said, yeah, why not? Put it on stage, because it's starting to stand up on its own now. And at the same time, conventional politics, conventional economics that we've grown up with are starting to fall over. And nobody really believes that stuff anymore, which gave me confidence, because you don't want to go on stage and be shot down into pieces. It's pretty scary out there, and you want to, come away with some sort of dignity, So none of us, I mean, I'm pretty used to making a fool of myself, but there is a limit. But I felt with this material now, or 18 months, 2 years ago, that actually we had a fair shot. And what I'd really done with the resource-based economy material, I mean, I didn't set out to do this with my life, really, but it seemed, once I'd found it, it seemed to have so much credibility that it was almost unbelievable. And basically, because I didn't sort of have a conventional education, I didn't go to university, I'm very used to asking other people. So if I've got something that I don't fully understand, then I'm quite happy to say, I don't know, what do you think? And that's what I did really with the resource-based economy material, is take it to the next level. And sure, the hippies understood it, the poor people understood it, the native people, the Maori here understood it, it's very close to their cultural values. And then I started taking it to schools and to universities and to exhibitions, and nobody could ever break it. A lot of people didn't understand it, but nobody could ever say, actually, Richard, that won't work because of so-and-so, you know? A lot of people just say, wow. And the very first exhibition I went to, which is an event called EcoFest in Nelson, which is on annually, I thought I'd come away from there ridiculed and humiliated and, you know, tail between my legs thinking, oh, well, that was fun. You know, let's get back to reality now. But in fact, all I got was reinforcement, and people came up and they had a lot of questions, but I was able to answer the questions. And it made sense. And of course, when you start repeating things over and over to more and more people, you start to think, wow, this isn't just some wacky dream. And so the process went on. Anyway, so I went to thinking, well, let's test it at mayoral level, you know. These are the people that are running our country now. And sure enough, on stage, in the newspaper, on TV, with all the other mayors on stage answering questions from the public, God damn, Money Free stands up actually better than conventional economics, because that's all falling over, and we're all gradually realizing, and we see it coming now, just, you know, during our time of being active about this, nobody believes that stuff anymore. I mean, nobody. I even had the existing mayor say to me in a quiet moment, because I spent a lot of time with these people doing promotion work and meet the public, meet the candidates, answering questions, that kind of thing, presentations to businesses and organizations. One of the mayors actually said to me, I'm going to vote for you, Richard. Because they know that, you know, they know they're standing on pillars of sand, you know. They all know it, and that gives me a wonderful, actually an advantage over conventional politicians, because we know we're telling the truth. And
I'd like to get onto the contextual aspect that New Zealand, specifically Nelson, where you are, this city, because it seems that it has provided like a suitable environment for the political proposal that you have, and it has been well accepted, as you're mentioning. So what can you tell us about it, and these also like the feedback process that has happened between you and the people?
Sure. Okay. Nelson's a very remote city. It's a city of about 45,000. The nearest large cities are 5 hours drive away, and across the mountains, it's a very long way to anywhere, basically, in Nelson. So there's been a long tradition, a culture of independence. It's also has the most sunshine of anywhere in New Zealand, which is a lot, and it's a really, I mean, it's a sort of a holiday town as regards the climate, and there's a lovely culture there. A lot of hippies actually came from Europe in the 1960s and 70s, and they now are very heavily involved in agriculture, horticulture, and sort of art and tourism-based business. But they still retain a lot of their old original values that they brought with them when they were escaping, you know, the bad things about Europe, you know, during that part of the 20th century. So there's a lot of idealistic people. On the whole, the population is generally wealthy, although there's certainly plenty of poverty too. And we do have this great remoteness, which makes us, I think, much more independent and more possibly, I was going to say inward-looking, but more likely to look locally for solutions. And we don't take too much notice of what goes on in Wellington, the capital, or in Auckland, the business centre. You know, in fact, they're sort of viewed with some scepticism, those places. And Nelsonians, and the region as a whole, the Tasman region, is sort of used to doing things itself. You know, ever since the Europeans first came here 150 years ago. You know, so there's very much a culture of independence. Yeah.
Yeah, that I would say that is like a principal thing or main thing to look at here, because I was looking at a resource-based economy in, for example, let's say Mexico City. You got more than 20 million people. It seems really unlikely. However, I do see the value in creating this kind of proposals in a community that already has this foundation, let's say culture, education, of maybe volunteering or being willing to use their time in supporting others. So can you tell us a little bit more about also what you've learned of the people there in your groundwork and promoting resource-based economy, maybe some of the usual oppositions that they might give, and how you actually simply overcome them with your common sense and practical solutions?
Yeah. Yeah, volunteerism is an excellent word actually, Marlon. There's huge volunteer effort here. Again, in many ways, not just because the people are good people, but because there's nobody else to do things. And if we don't pitch up and do the volunteer stuff, it just won't get done. So people are really used to sort of going a bit outside of their comfort zone to get things done that they want in society, you know, which has been a great reinforcer for me to see that actually people do want a good society. They don't just want more for themselves. And that's been a really good point to touch on when I've been making presentations, particularly to a skeptical audience, you know, who frequently say, oh, when it's all money free, nobody will do anything. Whereas, in fact, I can say to pretty much anybody over about, in fact, of any age in the audience, but you already do volunteer work now, despite being poor and insecure and exhausted and stressed, you know, and worried about the future. You still pitch up at the weekends and in the evenings and do stuff because you want a good society. And then when people, and I mean, one of the presentations we did was for a totally voluntary organization. And then I could just cast my hand across the whole audience of, I think there was about 80 people there, and say, you're all doing voluntary work now. That you get nothing out of it financially whatsoever, but you do it because you want a good environment, you know. And of course, collectively, they sort of, oh yeah. And so when it comes, and then you just an easy lead on to say, if you're prepared to volunteer for things that, you know, at the end of the day are really in our environment anyway, are nice to have things, you know. They're not. People aren't really volunteering for the basics of life. They're volunteering to have a better community centre or a sports team, or to, I don't know, to help with pest control or conservation type of things. You know, people do a lot of volunteering for that. It's a natural lead on to say, well, surely you'll volunteer to make sure that the electricity supply is worked. You'll volunteer to make sure that the vehicles are maintained and that the hospital still runs. You know, I mean, why wouldn't you? Especially when you're free and basically retired, you know, from the drudgery of ordinary work. And your children's future is secure, and we're taking care of the planet, you know. Wouldn't you give something then when you're effectively retired and wealthy? And people then sort of, well, yeah, I suppose I would a bit. And when we were collecting signatures for the Money-Free Party's registration before the election, I had to collect 500 signatures, which took a long time actually, from basically total strangers in the street. I mean, we sort of got down to a very brief, I wasn't there to promote Money-Free Society, I was just there to get a signature for the Money-Free Party. So we got it very concise and very boiled down. And one of our most basic...
Oh, he's dropped out. So to anyone watching, there is questions and comments available for Richard. Let's see if he comes up again. Else we will see another solution. I'd like to remind everyone that we are discussing the Money-Free Party with Richard Osmaston, and so stay tuned and we'll see if he comes back. From my perspective, hello, Ana Garrudo. You're mentioning Zeitgeist. If you have any other comment on that, let us know. From my perspective, I have to mention something that we did say last Hangout that we would say back. They do get a welfare system in New Zealand, because there was a question with regards to an article where in New Zealand they are promoting a basic income. So they do get a welfare system. But what Richard was mentioning to me is that there is essentially no one that goes hungry in New Zealand. However, there are individuals that are treated as the lower level of society, and they do get that support to do some work. Even if they require a car, they actually give them a car, which I find quite amazing, because where I live here in Mexico, there's none of that. So we do have a question now, so let's see if he comes back. And
Hi.
another, okay, cool. I was just messaging you. Yes. So we have a question for you, Richard. I know that you left, and we kind of broke in the middle of something. However, here's a question, so let's get to it. So here it says, it's from Anna Briggs, and she's saying, "Hi Richard, what's your perspective on the connection between money being the problem and then money free as the solution? And what is your perspective on how system changes go hand in hand with personal change?"
Good question. Hi, Anna. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, for us, and I mean, we say this with total sincerity. We're not just sort of spouting off here. The money system really, in our opinion, is the only problem that humanity has. Basically, it's the only fault that there really is. And I mean, again, with utter sincerity, we see the changing to having no money and everything being free and everything being voluntary as the most important shift in human activity ever, basically. You know, we go from being barbaric as we are now, really, I mean, sophisticated barbaric, but it's still barbaric, me versus you, to cooperative and civilized. In its most basic form, because we have a false value system. And to survive, you have to subscribe with the most priority to that false value system. And all the other systems have to take second place, because without money, you have nothing at all. In fact, you don't even live. So you can have no influence whatsoever. And you won't even survive without money. So every other thing in our realization has to take second place to getting some money, even though you can't actually eat it or shelter yourself with it. You know, it has no value at all intrinsically. And I think one of the hardest parts of this to grasp on the sort of macro level is that there isn't really, excuse me, an enemy out there. We're used to seeing an individual or an organization or a corporation as the bad guys, you know. And I think, I mean, that's natural. We're just simple cave-dwelling creatures, really. But the fault here is in every single one of us. And the fact that and I mean, I sort of touched on this earlier. I didn't quite finish, unfortunately, we got cut off. But everybody basically wants to do good. They want to live in a good society. They want to have a secure environment. They want to take care of the environment, but they can't afford it. They just can't do it because of the money system. So you've got 7 billion people basically having to scrape what they need off someone else. That's the only way to get it. You know, you have to fight for literally everything. We don't want to fight. We'd like to share. But if you don't fight and you do share, you'll end up with nothing because of the system. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I'd like to also point out how, in terms of looking at removing money, I look at it more as redefining the value that we have upon everything and everyone and everything that we do, because, you know, many times we can veer toward the problem of, oh, how will you go on without money? But if you look at it, if you start implementing certain values, and this is something that I also wanted to ask you in relation to implementing certain values, certain perspectives upon what you do as your responsibility, like a giving and receiving process to your society, then it won't be like the usual punishment reward type of mentality. So it is essentially like also an inner process. So this goes also hand in hand with the second part that Anna's question. What is your perspective on how system changes goes hand in hand with personal change?
Okay, good. Yeah, it is a good question. Thanks for reminding me. I don't think we need to change that much. What I nearly got to earlier was in talking to probably 1,000 people on the street, very briefly saying, if everything was free and if everything was voluntary and you didn't have to do anything, right, you can still get everything you need for free. You've got no bills, no rent, no mortgage. It doesn't mean everything's unlimited, but certainly all the things you need will be free. What will you do with the rest of your life? Will you do nothing at all? Do you just want to watch TV and eat chocolate and sit around all day for the rest of your life, or do you want to do something? And without a single exception, everybody, and we're talking right through the social spectrum, says, no, I'd like to do something. I'd like to care for children. I'd like to work on the environment. I'd like to work on solar energy. You know, that's what people have deep in their hearts. And I mean, I'm utterly convinced that that's normal. That's how human beings actually are underneath. But they have to wear this sort of shell, this veneer of aggression and acquisition, because otherwise you'll perish. You know, you don't have a choice in this system. So I think people's actual natural persona is very much geared towards reciprocity and sharing and cooperation, and the hostility and the competition that we have to use to survive is extremely alien to us as human creatures, actually. And I think, and of course it's a gamble, we don't know this for sure, but here in New Zealand, there's still a lot of Maori people, the indigenous people of New Zealand, who they only ever had money-free values. And they don't consider themselves as separate from the earth, as separate from each other, from the environment, even from their ancestors. They don't have the distinctions that we have of individuality. And it's much, much easier for them to grasp money-free concepts, because that's nature, that's just what we should be doing, that's normal. And of course they remember their grandparents, or even sometimes themselves, living in that sort of society. It's not that far away from us. And I think for those of us living in a modern 21st century sort of environment, although it seems massively alien today, actually it's very close. And it's, from a system to a human point of view, if the system changes, I think the humans are just a hair's breadth away from changing too. Again, it's so win-win this. Not only are you going to be much, much better off. I mean, every single human being on the planet can enjoy what we would consider a millionaire lifestyle today, but without the consumption. It doesn't have to include all the fossil fuels and the pollution that it does, you know, today, because, oh, it's the 21st century. We know how to do it better now, don't we? And we can do it for everybody. So not only are people going to be much, much better off, but they'll be operating as humans actually desire to operate, you know, as the animals desire to operate in an abundant environment. When there's plenty of food, plenty of shelter, plenty of warmth, all these creatures behave extremely differently. You know, people, one of the most common opposition or sort of arguments I get is, but, oh, it's not about money, it's about human nature, Richard. And I mean, I frequently have my dogs with me when I'm on the street, actually, and they're usually lying down in the sunshine, half asleep. And I say, well, okay, I mean, can you describe human nature? Or can you describe dog nature? Because if you put two dogs in a pit with one piece of meat, I mean, eventually they'll kill each other, for sure, just as humans would. But if you put them in a lovely environment with lots of food, and it's safe and secure, and they're being cared for, and there's plenty of everything, they're totally different creatures, just as humans are. You know, and if our children were starving, then ultimately we'd kill also to get food, you know.
Yes, so I do agree with this coercive aspect of the system itself, and how if we actually make it something friendly and sustainable and that is veered toward guaranteeing each one's security, then we would change who we are within it, of course. We have other questions, so let's get to them. Thanks, Anna, for that. So we got Kim Scudamore, and she's saying, hi, Richard, how do you propose to explain these to those that already have a lot of money? For example, businessmen and those of the elite in your community. And how will you be able to convince them to give up their wealth or self-interest, or would they?
Would they indeed? That's a very good question. Thank you. Yeah, and as I said earlier, we've talked to people right across the social spectrum, from multimillionaires, some of the richest people in New Zealand, to the very poorest people, and to children. I mean, everybody. And there's several answers to this question. I'll try and be as brief as possible. And this is one of the tricky things about money free. There's rarely just straight, simple, snappy answers, you know, because we're taking a whole societal framework here, and there's a lot of small adjustments. But each individually, they're only small. Basically, and my son used to work on super yachts in Europe, and he spent a lot of time with those billionaire families who have unlimited money almost yachts, jets, all the stuff you could want. But believe me, they're not happy either. They're just as unhappy as we are. They just got more expensive problems. And now we've realized that, oh no, we all share the air, don't we? We all share the same water. Gradually, societally, we're realizing that if you have poor neighbors, you too are ultimately poor. The children of these super rich people, they go to extremely expensive schools, and they spend a lot of time looking at societal difficulties, at environmental issues, all that kind of thing. These new rich people are well aware of how significant these problems are, and it's very easy for us to label, again, the enemy, other groups, as being the perpetrators of this. But, I mean, in short, today, even the rich are poor, because without a healthy environment, it's no good to anybody. And if your children are going out, I don't know, into the city to go to shopping or to go to a nightclub, if there's poor people around, desperate people, disillusioned, depressed people, your children are in danger, you know, and that's no good to anybody. So the other thing that is really important, and I can go on about this one for ages, Marlon, so be careful.
Okay.
Modern people are not who we imagine that they used to be. The modern business people are our generation. I mean, I'm 50, you're obviously a lot younger, Marlon, but there's plenty of billionaires, 50 and younger, who grew up post CND, post the hippie movement, with very green credentials. And I can visualize myself making a presentation to Mark Zuckerberg, Richard Branson, and you know, the founders of these other massive companies, Larry Page, for example, these guys. And I mean, if you look at the Google staff employment conditions, I don't know if you're familiar with what it's like to work, but it's more like a lifestyle than a
like
job.
A playground as well. Everyone enjoys themselves there.
And in fact, these people would do it for nothing, because they get together for the inspiration and the intellectual contribution, you know, and the things that they can do together with the technology are just amazing. And in fact, I think quite quickly, and as I say, I've talked to several business people here, and I mean, I have to be gentle, and you have to expect people to take a little time, and I can't say anybody's signed up to this totally, but I can easily see these modern business people, what is it that is holding your company back? Because, you know, Richard Branson, he wants Virgin and Virgin Group to be green. He wants them to be, making lots of money, but he doesn't need any more money. You know, what he needs is money to buy. He wants his employees to be happy. He really does. He wants his employees' families to be happy. He wants to do right by the environment. You know, he's constantly going to Africa to do charity work, but of course they can't fix anything just with money. And so they sell another 1 million airline seats, and they get some more money, and they can give some more charity. But what's it doing to the climate when you're burning all those extra airplane miles? There's all, you know, and these big business people, they're very visionary. They're prepared to take risks, and I'm really quite enthused now, and I spend a lot more time making promotions to how should we say, mainstream people, business people, than I do to hippies and activists and musicians and artists, because it's the business people that go out and do stuff. I mean, in the past, and I've been one, I mean, we've done a lot of things wrong in the past, mainly because we didn't know. You know, our parents' generation had no idea that you couldn't just carry on chopping down rainforests. You know, they thought it went on forever. But now we're learning. These business people, these rich people, they've got as much to lose as we have. And I think they're coming around. That's my answer. Sorry. Yeah, they're on board too. You know. Yeah.
Yes, eventually everyone will have to catch up with what's going on. You cannot really ignore most of it in terms of sustainability, which was also part of my questions, and obviously the link that there is to resource-based economy, not only as you everything is available for you, but also having this application of this environmental awareness, of course. So if you can tell us a little bit more on this, but I'll just read a comment very quickly. Thanks, Kim, for your question. And Adele Marie is saying, I think to give back to support a society would give oneself respect and self-empowerment. Thanks for your
Brilliant.
comment, Adele.
Brilliant. Which brings up, can I comment on that quickly?
Go for it.
Great, it's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. In New Zealand, there's a word called mana, M-A-N-A, and you see it used a bit in Western culture, but here it's a Maori word, and it means, simplified, it means status, but you cannot buy it. Absolutely no way can you buy mana, but it's extremely important, especially for men, but for women as well, and you only get it by giving, whether it's your time or your labor or your fruits or whatever it is that you give to your community. It's very important, you know, and in fact it's the main driver of sort of social stature. People who have contributed a lot to their community have great mana, and that brings them social, not glorification, but prominence. And for people that want social prominence, who want to be heroes, who want to be the #1 guy, you know, there's a way for them to do that in a resource-based economy, and it's not from taking more resources for yourself. It's actually by giving. And when we look more closely at what drives people's motivations today, if you want to be admired and you want to be respected and you want to be looked up to, basically you're going to have to do a lot of taking of resources or other people's labor or, you know, animals or something. You've got to have to take more than your fair share so that you can afford that Ferrari or that business jet or that bigger house. So at the moment we actually reward as a society those who have done the most taking, which is amazing. Whereas once money's gone, the only way to get social prominence, to get social status, to get mana is by giving. And suddenly we will find ourselves rewarding, not with baubles and, you know, new cars and expensive curtains, but with social respect and approbation. The only way you will get that is by giving. And guess who gives at the moment? It's the carers, the mothers, the cleaners, the nurses. You know, these kind of people who actually are the most important people in society. And what do we give them at the moment? Nothing.
It's backwards, absolutely.
It's exactly backwards, precisely right. Thank you so much for that, Kim, Adele. That was a really good point. Yeah, really good point. You can still be a superstar, but you'll only get it by giving, not by taking. Yeah.
Yes, and that's like a fundamental change in how we value, as I was mentioning before, because this is precisely what seems to be one of the main shifts, if we want to call it that, that has to happen within us to start valuing that aspect of giving instead of just taking the most and revering our captor, so to speak, as Stockholm syndrome, you know. So we have some other questions, so I'll go through them. By Jean Kenny. She's saying, thank you, Richard, for sharing your work and efforts. What practical actions do you suggest can individuals do in places like New York City to promote the idea of rethinking consumer culture and competition as a way of living?
Okay, in New York, I mean, there is a massive following of the Zeitgeist movement and also of the Venus Project. And these are in tens of, and I mean, they're a great place to start. You know, you're not alone. You won't see this on the street, but as soon as you look on the internet, you realize, oh, wow, this is massive. And of course, then you realize it's global as well. But it's not visible on the streets of New York City where, yeah, everyone's fighting tooth and nail just to get a meal and a ride, you know. And I suppose, to be realistic, in a place like that, you probably wouldn't get very far standing for mayor on the basis of a resource-based economy. You know, you probably would get laughed out of the place. One of the reasons I think I haven't really been laughed at is we've lived here for 11 years. We came here from the UK originally, but most people are immigrants actually, all on the whole relatively recently. And because it's a fairly small society, as I said, in the city there's only 45,000 people, essentially everybody knows everybody. And, you know, we talk about 6 degrees of separation between individuals around the world, but in Nelson it's more like 2. So as soon as you talk to somebody in the street, you realize that you, in fact, you know another person jointly. And so we're all very closely connected. And personally, I've done a lot of not work, but I've been involved both in my work, but in a lot of volunteer positions in sports groups, sailing groups, music organizations, civic organizations, just as a regular committee, a committee member, a secretary, a chairman, a dad giving lifts to kids, helping out at school, coaching soccer, just being a normal member of society. But occasionally Richard puts on this other hat, and now he's talking about a totally different economy. But they already know me, and some of these kids, I mean, I've known them, they're 18 now, and I've known them since, when they started to walk. These kids have grown up knowing this guy, my kid's dad. He's not a wacko. He doesn't come out of the woods. He runs a business and he has a farm and he has, he lives an ordinary life. He's a responsible member of society, contributing, but he also talks very seriously about something that is just way out of our comfort zone. But because I think, I mean, I'm making this up really, but because I behave in a respectable, sort of conventional fashion in the rest of my life activities, people take me much more seriously in this one. I don't have loads of tattoos and loads of dreadlocks and wear a kaftan. I'm a normal guy, and that is different. We haven't heard this kind of talk from ordinary, working people before. It's always come from hippies, from people who live in caravans in the woods, who I love, don't get me wrong, but they've never been taken seriously, really.
I like the fact that you're talking about more like also being the example and already embodying that which you propose, which is very much aligned with what we also encourage people to do in terms of first beginning to educate ourselves and getting to these practical application of what would be to really give yourself to others and changing the way that we live in our reality, and not only promoting like the system in itself as a solution, but you're with everything that you're doing. And what I like about your movement and proposal is that you're living that and taking it to the streets and talking to people and doing work in a community that is also quite apt to do this kind of work. So thanks for that answer. We have another, this is a comment and in reply to the question that Anna Briggs had placed for you before. She's saying, thanks for your reply, Richard. Studies have shown that when people are given free reins, they quickly revert to patterns of greed, even in so-called anarchist communities. So freedom must intrinsically be linked to the development of a money-free mind.
I mean, does Anna think those anarchistic communities were totally isolated from the rest of society? Because, I mean, she's right, and there's been lots of sort of hippie communes and attempts to do this in the past, but ultimately, on the outside was the old world, where it's dog eat dog and it's me versus you. Yes. And significantly, we haven't had the technology before. I don't know how old Anna is, but even if she's 20, the technology has advanced so far in that time. It's so easy today to produce the things we need. I mean, really, what we're talking about post-money is there will hardly be any work to do at all. In all those hippie communes, and certainly in indigenous older societies from history, they didn't have computers and satellites, automated farming, robotic machinery for manufacturing. They didn't have all those technological advances, and somebody still had to go out and do the digging. Physical, hard drudgery and toil, day in, day out. Somebody had to do all the filing and administration. There's still a massive workload to support a society, whereas today, it's all over. Work is finished. And again, when I was talking to people on the street, and I mean, I think we confirmed this by talking to over 1,000 people, and in fact, Nick Tapping from Money Free Party UK has got a video online of him interviewing people saying, what would you do if you were free and retired and everything was sorted out? Everybody wants to do something, and because of the technology, the little bit that they do want to do is enough to support everybody. And I mean, the greed, a separate subject now is human greed. I mean, I would say most greed is generated by marketing, because, I mean, none of us wanted an iPhone until we saw one. You know, personally, I wasn't born dreaming of having one. I only got it, you know, it only came to me when I saw an advert for it, or I saw that someone else had one and they had social status because of it, and they were able to get on faster because they had it. And that will all change. There won't be any advertising. I mean, marketing will be pointless when money's gone. There'll be just no purpose. I mean, people just won't do it.
Yeah, we
So
have redefined marketing, for example, as just a tool to get to know what the products are really about, the intent, the ingredients. So more of an educational marketing is what we propose,
yeah.
if the marketing industry is to
Yeah.
continue, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. Currently, in inverted commas, works at Coca-Cola will be bothered about their sales for next year.
So I'd like to ask you like a very practical question about the logistics supply chain, and it goes hand in hand with this. Like, there must be some kind of regulation or way to keep track of the consumption of things. So what's your proposal on that?
Great, another good question. Sorry, I'm going to have to give you two answers, Marlon. The first one is, basically, if we decide, I mean, today is Monday for us. Let's say we're going to go money-free on Thursday. Basically, everything will stay the same. And I mean, this might be sort of difficult in a place like Mexico, where of course society is very different. But certainly here, I mean, I guess you could describe it as the leading edge of society, really. I mean, it's an extremely sophisticated environment. You know, pretty much everything is taken care of, not necessarily well, but it's a very advanced society. On Thursday, when we go money free, our proposal is that we don't change anything at all. The only thing that is physically different is on your invoice or your payslip or your receipt, the figure in the bottom right-hand corner is now always 0. So the logistics supply chain, I mean, for example, on an invoice, and now if you can think of our planet as sort of spaceship Earth, you know, we do have to record everything that we use, where it came from, when it was extracted, where it went to, all this kind of stuff. We need to track this stuff because it's a finite planet. We just learned that the other day, you know, this is really new information now. But we have the systems for that logistics supply chain, and that's proven by, I mean, if you're a very rich person, you can have as many little motorbikes or as many beefsteaks or as many TVs as you like. That chain will continue to supply them because it's sort of lubricated by money. So we already have the logistics supply chain in place, and it's all there ready to go. The only thing that needs to change is the actual money element. The rest of it we'd like to keep exactly the same. As regards control of it and the legal, how much do you have? What's the limit? How much stake can you take when you go to the supermarket and it's all free? This will be societally determined, because in that logistics supply chain, now that everybody is a volunteer, right from the guy who does the mining survey in Australia in the first place, the people who do the exploration, the people who cut the ground to dig it out, the indigenous communities that they have to move, the transport company, the operary, the processing, you know, the whole chain right down to that item being on the shelf in your supermarket. Every single one of those human positions is filled by a human being who now is only there as a volunteer. They don't have to do it because they'll lose their family's food if they don't, which is why, you know, that's why people go to work at the moment, basically, because they'll starve if they don't. There's this bribery going on all the time. Once everything is voluntary, because it's so easy to produce what we need today, you know, up here, I mean, I'm up here in the mountains, but in fact, the average farmer here is responsible for about 1,000 animals. You know, one individual in New Zealand agriculture can raise 1,000 animals. That's how easy farming is today. One truck driver can transport 40 tons of materials 500 kilometers in a day. And in fact, all he did was sit there and listen to the radio, you know. It's so easy to produce what we need today, and because people are empathetic, they do want a good society, they'll provide what we need. But along that supply chain, if somebody says, hang on, these are really, you know, there's an indigenous community, for example, has lived here for thousands of years, stop. And that stop message goes right the way down the supply chain. And I mean, again, it's all on computers already via Facebook and eBay and our computer-based logistics supply chain, which is all fully established. Then ultimately the consumer will say, hang on, how come there's no more widescreen TVs? And I mean, as a society, I mean, if we want widescreen TVs, then collectively we'll find a way of producing them that doesn't displace an indigenous community in Aboriginal Australia, for example. And it's, geez, I'm getting a bit broad here now, but
yeah, because the question of slave labor could come in, you know, like who's going to work to build something that is, well, they're usually working in like slave labor conditions, so that would be another aspect to it. Like who would actually volunteer to do, like the labor conditions would have to change, of course.
They would. Wouldn't that be a great thing? So we don't have any slaves anymore. Sorry,
yeah,
I just had to plug my battery. The difference is that at the moment, if you need, say, a plumber to come and clear your drain, okay, or say that the sewer at the bottom of the street is blocked and there's unpleasant material overflowing all over the street. At the moment, in the money society, that's the plumber's problem. And if he doesn't get that sorted out, he won't get paid and his family will starve, okay? But post-money, it's actually a societal problem that the street is covered in excrement. And if we don't take care of people who have the plumbing skills, the equipment and the training and the knowledge, then we're going to end up with disease and, you know, it's going to stink. But this is really important. I hope I'm making it clear. We're only going to address problems that are important to society. And because we have the benefit of technology to make fixing things really easy for us, if nobody wants to, I don't know, pick oranges, and there's no mechanized way of picking oranges, we can't do it with a robot or a machine, then society won't get oranges. But
so it's like if you want it, you create it, and that's it. Like if you create a need or you feel that you require something, then you find a way to create it and you take care of it yourself.
Yeah, but collectively, because we've got, you know, there's all these retired people who
many.
probably also want.
Yeah.
And some of them are computer designers, some of them are software writers, some of them are robot builders, some of them are welders, you know, some of them are design engineers. They also want oranges. And if you put it with more sort of pragmatic things like healthcare or looking after old people or the energy supply system, you know, we all agree on it already, we want a reliable electricity system. Nobody would disagree with you. And it's not reliant upon one guy who produces the electricity. There's a whole, again, a logistics supply chain maintained by human beings who also have an interest in having a good supply system of electricity. They also have elderly parents that need care. They have children that fall off bicycles and have accidents. So they have an interest in having a hospital. They have an interest in having a good, organic, sustainable food supply chain. That's what society wants. Does society want tobacco and alcoholic drinks for kids, Coca-Cola, confectionery, cosmetics, fashion? I don't know. If we want that, by all means, go and volunteer your time to produce it. Personally, I'm happy to leave all that stuff behind. And I mean, I'm getting way off here now, but basically, society will automatically solve its own problem, because a societal problem looks to society to fix it, not to the plumber or the engineer or to the politician, you know. And because of technology, we are unable to fix anything today. Yeah. How are you getting on with that?
We have another question, and it relates to this technological progress. So it's from Yogan Barrientos, and he's saying, hi, for the last hundreds of years, technology has progressed rapidly. Much less can be said for human personality, behavior, or nature. Could a realistic solution be implemented without tackling this?
I absolutely think so, yes. I mean, I still think we're basically cave dwellers who have stumbled across computers, you know. but humans are so adaptable. If you look at the different ways that humans live around the planet, you know, from Eskimos to tree dwellers to, you know, New York City apartment dwellers, there's so many ways that humans can adapt to different forms of their environment that I don't think they'll have any problems with this whatsoever. And going back to the dog nature point, when we have abundance, this is again a pivotal distinction between what's happened before and where we are now. Because we have such abundance, there's plenty of everything for everybody. So you're going to have a home, you're going to have plenty of space, you're going to have education for your children, you're going to have healthcare and great healthy food to eat, free transport, you know, a modern, basically a millionaire lifestyle. How will you personally behave then? How, you know, for this, sorry, I've forgotten your name, the questioner, but, you know, what is your family's attitude when they're full of food and they're warm and safe and comfortable? You know, do you know anybody in those circumstances who's really going to go out and rob someone else, who's going to go out and assault somebody else, who's going to go out and harm the environment? You know, it's a very different place to where we are now. But I think we can adapt actually instantly, you know, literally, yeah.
Let's get on to, because we've gone way past our time, so I'd like to ask you the final question, and this is with regards to maybe many people that might have the intent to start doing what you're doing, but maybe have some fears or have some doubts as to how to go about it. So what do you consider is important for them to consider? What can they practically do? And also share a little bit with us what you've learned of yourself throughout this process as well.
Sure, yeah, good question. The most important thing is to talk to other people. Even if you start with the safest people that you trust the most and that aren't going to laugh at you, your family, your friends, your partners, etc., and you'll already know which ones are receptive to this kind of discussion and which ones aren't. And start with the easy ones, you know, because it's not necessarily a difficult process, but it can be. You know, there's testing moments where you really get stuck. You know, you think, crikey, maybe, you know, these guys have got it all wrong and there is no other way. But the answers come in time. And, of course, you won't figure it out by yourself. You have to share it with other people and have conversations. And you very quickly, when you start having a conversation, you just very quickly learn who's receptive and who's not. And what we found is there's, I mean, actually millions of other people who feel the same way. We seem to have stopped there, Marlon. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but your image froze.
Okay, yeah, it says Hangouts has stopped. But
okay, so he dropped out. And there's a clarification from Adele Marie, and she's saying regarding Anna's question about the research, what the research shows, the question is who funded the research, because I think many of these reports have been manipulated to say people cannot take responsibility and thus need to be controlled to keep the enslavement going. I think it's an interesting aspect to raise, and I also consider that we do have to give ourselves the opportunity to try out
Marlon,
things.
we're back, I think.
Yeah, we are back. So share with us the last thoughts on what you consider important to do and consider it.
Hello, Marlon. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, cool, yeah. So talking to other people is the most important thing of all, because in our individualized, Facebook-based TV working society, we've stopped talking to each other, you know, especially about sort of tricky, complex subjects that may, you know, may test you a little bit, but everybody else feels the same. The TV would have you believe that they don't, but in fact, just under the surface, there's so many other people who have exactly the same motivations and inspirations and are really excited about this. And when you start talking to other people who feel the same way, of course, you feel massively reinforced and you go on to the next level. And I mean, from there, you just keep going. And once you have, I mean, as I did, I felt sufficiently supported by my community that I was prepared to go literally on stage with this and into TV and media, and I mean, ultimately into a general election, you know, basically just from initially talking to people and realizing, wow, we're not alone. This guy who I always thought was a bit weird, actually he feels the same. So does she, you know, and that's so exciting to realize. I mean, here we are at the end of the day, Marlon. I mean, you're in Mexico and I'm in New Zealand, and look at that, you know. Is that far enough for you? That's amazing.
Yeah, and we have the same principles. Yeah, so that's very valuable, and thanks a lot for sharing your experience. We weren't able to see your face at the end, but I consider that this has been a very nurturing conversation and learning a lot from you as well, and also motivating ourselves to actually get out there and get to the community level, which is what you represent. So thanks a lot for this discussion, Richard, and we really hope that things go well with the Money Free Party in New Zealand and around the world. So we read the last comment from Bella B. She's saying, great discussion. Thanks, guys. Human relationships and the cultivation of practical common sense are key in our individual and humanities process. Go for it, Richard.
Great. Thank you so much. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marlon. Well done. Bye-bye.
I fully agree, and thank you for being here. Thank you to our viewers. We will see you next time in another Hangout in a similar topic with regards to permaculture. So stay tuned and see you next week. Bye, Richard.
Bye-bye.